do visit IFA Galaxy in social media. We have a Twitter handle, we have a social media in Facebook and LinkedIn. Do connect with us. It becomes very important for us to reach messages to you, and we can do that very easily if you're connected with IFA Galaxy social media handles. So do connect. The industry has been evolving, my friends. We all know that. Right from the last 20, 25 years that many of us have been in this industry, we have seen the industry evolve. But how is it going to evolve in the future? And what is the kind of role that you and me as MFDs are going to play in it is really a question that we all have in our minds. And to answer that question, we have another leader in the industry, none other than Sankaran Naren, to do the honors, to explain to us how the mutual fund industry is going to evolve and how we as mutual fund distributors are going to play a role in the future. I'm sure you're super excited to understand this. But first up, a little bit about Sankaran Naren. Sankaran Naren is currently the ED and CIO at ICICI Prudential Mutual Fund. He's been there from 2004. So in the last, say, 16 years plus, he has had a wonderful journey of moving in from his fund advisory to becoming the CIO of the business. And under his tenure, ICICI Mutual Funds assets has grown very smartly. Prior to ICICI, Sankaran Naren has had stints at Refco SIFI, HDFC Securities and Yoha Securities. I'm sure you're eagerly waiting to hear Naren's perspective. As always, Naren has been a very, very keen contributor in all the editions of IFA Galaxy. And none less this time, over to you, Sankaran Naren.
Welcome to all of you. It's a pleasure to talk to IFA Galaxy for the 10th successive year. So it's such a pleasure. I hope in the 11th year I'll be able to come and talk rather than do this from Bombay. So I think the last 1 year has been very, very interesting. And move to the next slide. See, basically over the period, 2017 was a year where we thought that, markets are not that cheap, but we were very more comfortable with a multi-cap kind of strategy. So we actually used that opportunity and conveyed, and it turned out to be something which worked, considering that 2017 was a year of small and mid-cap doing well. And it was in tune with your own leap as your mascot for the year. So if we go to 2018, next slide. If you go to 2018, we had actually a very cautious stance. So we moved to balanced advantage and credit risk as our framework, primarily because in 2018, markets had become pretty expensive. And that was a strategy which actually worked very well, because that market peaked in January and after that did not recover. And that call actually played out pretty well. Although there were problems in credit, it did not affect our fund in any way. And it was part of your good to great framework. And if you go to next slide, 2019, we clearly thought that markets had stabilized. So if people wanted lump sum, people could invest in asset allocation, or people could invest in SIP, STPs, because markets had actually corrected in 2018, as you know. And that call also kind of worked, because through the year 2019, markets actually recovered significantly. And it was a year where if you had invested towards the beginning of the year, it was better than if you had invested towards the end of the year. And we also did not predict that markets would keep going up so much, because markets were not cheap. But that call also kind of worked in line with your refresh, relearn, reboot theme. In 2020, as you know, yours happened, your convention happened before COVID. So luckily for us, we were very, very cautious, and because markets were very costly. And we had recommended only cautious strategies like BAF, asset allocator fund, freedom SIP, credit risk, and that. And we had said that basically you have to start using technology. That was one of the best decisions, because people who had started using technology were the people who actually managed to handle COVID better. And I would say that turned out to be one of the best calls for us in 2020. But I would say, if you go to the next slide, 2021 was the year where I think we were most positive. We said that you can invest in most aggressive funds for the first time in 2021, because in 2020, all the large caps and those kind of things had done very well. And we felt that there was finally, we are always known as a cautious fund house. So we felt that you can actually look at investing in less cautious funds. And we actually brought in business cycle fund in the beginning of 2021, primarily because we felt that this is the year where actually you can take some risk. And that turned out to be a very interesting way for us to actually invest. And we felt that that was something that 2021 was possibly the first year where we recommended strategies like value discovery, India opportunities kind of funds. And that was something which, if you look at it, the large cap benchmark, this was the first year where large cap benchmark could be very easily beaten by all the strategies. And that's something which was good. So where are we in 2022? And so this year you have started a nice thesis controlled and del. The way we look at it, it is learn and unlearn and learn. And I believe it's very important to unlearn and learn. For example, from being small cap, I had to become large cap investor. From being just an equity investor, I had to start looking at macro, asset allocation, and debt. So it's very important for all MFDs to unlearn and learn. And this presentation I made today focuses on what you have to unlearn and learn. Our view this year is that this is going to be the toughest year for mutual fund distributors. And our thesis is that you have to do asset allocation. We go back to our older school, and we believe in active management, because end of the day, as you would have seen, every month there are ups, downs, up, downs. And you have to do active management and asset allocation as the only way forward. You are going to have one of the most volatile years in market history. And that is the way we look at it. And that is what you will have to, one of the things that you will have to unlearn to learn is in that whole framework, that we think that you are not going to have years like March 2020 to November 2021, which I called the central bank bull market, global central bank bull market, where basically the global central banks ensured that everyone made money. That phase is over in November 2021. Now you have got to do active management and asset allocation, because making money like March 2020 to November 2021 is over. If you don't do active management and asset allocation, you are not going to make money. And you would have seen it in December, January, February. Every period you have seen volatility at this point of time. And I think it will continue over a period of time. Everything's volatile means markets going down. It doesn't mean that. You have seen it. There are days when markets go down. There are days when markets go up. You'll have both at this point of time. You go to the next slide. We are in a low inflationary environment going into a high inflationary environment. So that is the other part you'll have to learn, that we are not any longer in a low inflationary environment. And when we are going from a low inflationary environment to a high inflationary environment, we are going to have a situation where typically debt doesn't do well. And actually the best area at that point of time is actually floating rate. Although floating rate funds have done very badly in the last 3 to 6 months, actually when you move from a low inflationary environment to a high inflationary environment, the best product turns out to be floating rate bonds, and any product which is invested in floating rate bonds. And it is really funny that the product which is best suited for floating rate period is this period where you move from low inflation to high inflation. Actually, it's very simple. What does a floating rate bond do? It invests in something which is linked to 6-month T-bill. So if 6-month T-bill interest rate is going up, which is the product which can benefit the most? It is floating rate bond. If I invest in any other scheme, I'm invested in fixed coupon bonds. So there, if the yields go up, the rates will, the product should come down. So it is really, I find it very interesting. One of the biggest unlearning to learn is that, all the floating rate bonds have done very badly. This is possibly the best product at this point of time for the next 1 year. At this point of time, when I think very clearly, because at the end of the day, in a low inflation to high inflation environment, it has the best potential to deliver a good risk-adjusted return experience over the next 1 year, notwithstanding what has happened to the bond in the last 3 months to 6 months. If you go to the next slide, we have a situation. We had a huge liquidity, but now that liquidity will be withdrawn by every central bank. And therefore, you're going to have a very, very different experience than March 2020 to November 2021. Along with that, you're going to have COVID. You're going to have Ukraine, and COVID may go away, but Ukraine problem is there. We don't know how Ukraine will shape up. So we are going to have a very, very different period, and we don't know how it is going to shape up. But in these kind of environments, you'll have to bet on high inflation products like floating rate is something which comes out very, very clearly in the thought process that we have at this point of time. You go to the next slide. What we learned is that the central banks had pumped so much money, and that central bank pumping so much money had helped all of us. But now that process is going to come away. We are not going to see central banks pumping money. In fact, central banks may drain out money, and in that process, always we have seen equities are volatile. Equities will be volatile, bonds will be volatile. And I believe that, if I take a 1-year view, very few things will not be volatile. And that is where we are at this point of time. So you're going to bet on volatility, and that is the learning we have to do. What is good from an MFD point of view, if there was no volatility, everyone goes direct into equity. But when volatility becomes very big, like what we have seen in the last 1 week or 2 weeks, people come to MFD because they have that person whom they can talk to at 10 o'clock because on what happened in markets. And that is what MFD manages to talk to them at 10 o'clock. Whether they can help explain what happens to the market or not, at least they got someone to talk at 10 o'clock. And that is why I believe that this is a better period for MFD rather than the period from March 2020 to November 2021, when central banks were just pumping money, and then you had a situation where there was no need for anyone because you are making money every day without fail. We go to the next slide. Valuations are very high. Valuations continue to be a risk at this point of time, and that is one of the reasons why we believe that equities are not a risk-free asset class. It is a asset class where we have to think of a booster STP kind of a framework. And I think that is something my team led by Jeevan would have explained to you. And I believe that is the kind of framework which we think is useful from our point of view. If you go to the next slide, clearly the business cycle is very good. The business cycle is so awesome that it gives you a scope that long-term investing in equity should make money. And that is the reason why a booster STP kind of strategy is something which we think has a lot of scope to do, followed by an SIP, because the business cycle certainly is something which is a big positive for the markets. And that is why both a booster STP followed by an SIP is a positive, primarily because of the fact that business cycle is good because corporate balance sheets are in great shape at this point of time. If you go to the next slide, clearly the US Fed rate hike is a real problem. US 10-year yield going up is a real problem. I don't think COVID is a problem. I think we are towards the end of COVID. Everyone has got COVID in India. So I don't think there is so much of a worry. And thanks to the government, we have had a phenomenal vaccination drive. So I don't think COVID is a problem, although we have written it because I never expected again Omicron to come. What else will come, we don't know. So we have put it as a risk. But I think both US Fed rate hike, Ukraine and US 10-year yield today has become a problem instead of COVID. We move to the next slide. Clearly, we have to worry about euphoric sentiment. The euphoric sentiment has clearly led to problems because a lot of IPOs which have done well on the retail side, particularly, they have started to fall. And that is something I have in our framework. Euphoric sentiment is a real problem. And that is a sign that you have to bet on booster STP, because at the end of the day, in euphoric sentiment phase like 2007, 2017, 1999, those are the phases where a booster STP kind of strategy would have helped you a lot. And that is what we are thinking at this point of time. You can move to the next slide. One of the things that, we have always believed at ICICI Prudential is that processes are more important over performance. In 2017, value discovery was doing badly because we focused on process. Process told us, as the next slide shows, that, we can't be positive on small cap. And, it told us so clearly that you have to be negative on small cap. At that point of time, people were very positive on small cap, and that led to value discovery doing badly in 2017 and not doing well in first half of 2018 and the second half of 2016. But we were very clear because our process told us that we have to do badly if needed, because there was heated valuation in small cap space. At that point of time, large caps were reasonably valued, and that strategy of focusing on process over performance, although it hurt our existing investors for 18 months to 24 months, but it clearly set the stage for a very good period after that. And that is our framework on process over performance, because there are times when performance will deteriorate. But that is what I would like to mention. If you go to the next slide, clearly in 2018, when we had that view, my CEO said, let's return PMS unit, let us return the small cap money. And that actually turned out to be the top of small cap at that point of time, because based on our process over performance framework. Go to the next slide. The small cap returns, as you know, after that did very badly for 2 years. Then after that, it's recovered after COVID. And clearly, that framework that we had used by my CEO to return small cap money in the PMS turned out to be a very good, interesting way to actually capture the top of small cap at that point of time. Go to the next slide. Similarly, in value versus growth, we were very clear. If you had heard our October 2020 call, we had actually for the first time in our monthly call, and we do these monthly calls faithfully month after month. In October 2020 call was the only call where we had to go stockwise, because we felt that we had reached that stage where it had reached an extreme, and therefore we went stockwise. And that October 2020 call was the only call where we would have gone stockwise in our monthly call, and that turned out to be the bottom of value stocks. And from there onwards, actually, value stocks have done extremely well compared to, and small cap stocks and mid cap stocks also did pretty well from that point, because we had a clear view at that point of time that it had become absurd. Just like small cap and mid cap had become absurd in January 2018 on the positive side, we had felt that value and stocks and metal stocks and all those kind of stocks had become absurd in September 2020 on one side. And we felt that, and it kind of really played out till recently. And that was something which we again believed on the process over performance thesis. So if you had looked at our products like India Opportunities as on September 2020, they had done extremely badly. But we were very convinced on our process over performance theme at this point of time. Whereas if you can look at it today, it's a very, very different situation from where we were at that point of time. So this is the process that we have followed on a continuing basis. Value discovery, of course, is now more than 17 years. I joined the firm in 2004, and it was launched in 2004, a month before I joined. So from that time onwards, it's been there. India Ops is about more than 3 years old. So I believe that this kind of a framework has really helped, that we always follow processes and not bother about performance. And because the process leading to long-term performance is our framework, and it's lined with all the disclaimers that SEBI tells us to do in every presentation. So we are very happy that SEBI tells us to do these disclaimers, because past returns is not equal to future. but you will have to follow processes all the time. And that's the framework that we had used. Go to the next slide. Similarly, as most of you know, and today it's become a product which everyone has launched, but I would say that, as a mascot for the industry today, we had correctly identified that this kind of a product can actually give a much better investor experience, like the Balanced Advantage Fund or the Fund of Fund which invests in equity, debt and gold asset allocator fund. Both these products have become mascots, and I must thank all of you for having recommended both the asset allocator fund which invests in equity, debt and gold asset allocator fund of fund and the Balanced Advantage Fund, because together both these products have now 53,000 crores. So I believe that, 38 plus 15. So I believe that these are the products which actually give the best investor experience, particularly when markets are volatile. So if you go to the next slide, clearly we are in a situation where in this fall, for example, markets actually gave a very good investing experience, again in line with our framework. And that is the kind of thing. So what do you have to unlearn and learn here? You have to unlearn that the bull market is over in November 2021 in the way it operated. Till the day Fed comes and says, I'm going to do quantitative easing, we are headed for a volatile period. And in that volatile period, asset allocation will win over everything else. That is the unlearning you have to do at this point of time. If you don't do that unlearning, that will be a problem, because from March 2020 to November 2021, frankly, it was actually anything which worked. And that is the reason in December, what we did was we came up with a very unique product called ICICI Prudential Passive Multi-Asset Fund of Fund, because we felt that if you are going to have an asset allocation product under the passive framework, that would be what we can do when the bull market caused by the global central banks is over. So that's the kind of product that we launched in line with our market view at that point of time. So if you go to the next slide, asset allocator fund of fund actually had a very low allocation. It came to 20% in January 2020. I don't know of a single this kind of a low allocation I've hardly seen in most products, and this was mainly because debt yields kept shooting up, and that was the main reason this happened. So this also provided a very good risk-adjusted investment experience for investors. So if you go to the next slide, I would say this also had that same thing. If you go to the next slide, past returns are not equal to future. We have to remember that very clearly, in line with all the disclaimers that we have to talk about. And I would say that, our view has always been that, at this point of time, you have to completely unlearn the past. In a global central bank bull market, returns are very easy. Once the global central bank bull market is over, if you do SIP, STP in debt, if you do asset allocation, and you choose a theme like value for the long run, it really has a very good opportunity. Or you choose, like if you go to the next slide, what we did is that these are the kind of investing mistakes that you have to learn. People have invested in IPOs without understanding the business. People have invested in stocks and funds based on past returns. Past returns are not useful for the future. People have not given due respect to valuations. People have not invested in debt. These are the kind of mistakes that people have done. And those are the important things that people have to keep in mind, actually. If you ask me, this is the most important. And I would say that the investment approach for 2022, which we believe in as part of the learning, is you have to respect asset allocation 100%. Our belief is most MFDs don't follow asset allocation, or they're not interested in it, because most of the new fund offers are in equity, and they sell new fund offers. So new fund offers are all non-equity, are all in equity. I would recommend that the MFDs remember that they have to sell all products. And booster STP is another thing that Jeevan and others in the team would have talked to you on. And I believe that's very important. It's very important to be conservative today. It's very important to do debt SIP, debt STP, particularly in products like floaters, which have done very badly recently. It's very important to consider the lower risk riskometer hybrid products like equity savings and equity arbitrage. As you know, we are a big fan of fund of funds, whether it is asset allocator or whether it is income optimizer or whether it is passive multi-asset fund of fund or whether it is passive strategy equity fund. We are big believers because what we believe is then it allows you to focus on the customer and it allows us to focus on the investing. So I believe that we believe that A, B, C, D, E, F is what you have to do. Don't forget C, don't forget D, don't forget E, don't forget F, don't forget AB. And this is what is very critical at this point of time. That has reached a very interesting phase where people have to do SIP or STP. Returns in the past have been terrible. And I believe particularly floating rate kind of products are the ones which are most suitable for SIP, STP and lump sum because the returns have been pathetic in the past. It is in line with my framework that any product or any asset class delivers pathetic returns, you have to look at it. I think this is the product which looks like most suited for it at this point of time. If you go to a situation, what is the other part of the learning which we are now, we don't miss every year to convey to IFA Galaxy and its MFDs is using technology. I think without technology, we would have all been wiped out post-COVID. And I think clearly technology is very important. More and more technology has to be used. We are also spending more and more on technology. And please give your advice to Haresh on what all we need to do, because it's very critical that we have to be at the cutting edge of technology. It's because of technology that for 18 months, I managed to sit at home and create alpha for my customers. So I think it's very important that technology, without technology, we are all in deep trouble over the next 5 to 10 years. Otherwise, you know what will happen? All these digital apps which have come up will eat all the mutual fund distributors, is what most people believe. I don't think mutual fund distributors are going to struggle. If they are going to take up technology, there is absolutely no problem. They have the experience of seeing cycles. They have the experience of seeing 1992, 94, 99, 2007, 2011, 2013, 2017, 2020. All the digital apps haven't seen that. So I believe that it's MFDs can do much better than them, but they also have to embrace technology fully. So as my guru Michael Mauboussin says, it is a combination of technology with a human touch which will win. And that is what I believe the MFDs can do very successfully. Just having technology will not win. Just having human touch will not win. Technology with a human touch will win maximum. And that is the whole framework we are doing, even in a fund of fund context. And that's why we believe that all of you should choose fund of funds, because that is again like technology with a human touch. That's the kind of framework we believe in. So this is next slide. And as we always believe in, it's process over performance. Performance can be cyclical, but there is nothing like nothing better than process. You will realize it over a period of time. And the advantage of having worked for the last 18 years in ICICI Prudential and watch the equity assets go up from 2,000 crores to more than 2 lakh crores is primarily because of the fact that we have always emphasized process over performance and focused totally on what we can do for our customers. Because we are managing other people's money, we are not managing our money. We are acutely conscious that we are managing other people's money. And that is something, whether it is in credit, whether it is in equity, that's why we are never worried that we give cautious calls, because finally we are managing other people's money. When you're managing other people's money, it's very important to be cautious when you need to be cautious. It's important to be aggressive when you need to be aggressive. You have to be defensive when you need to be defensive. And that is the reason why we actually have been at the forefront of products, whether it is at balanced advantage fund, today in passive multi-asset fund, whether it is in asset allocator fund of fund, whether in numerous new strategies like business cycle fund or special situation fund like India Opportunities, we have been at the forefront. I believe that the MFD had the glorious period of MFD was 2013 to 2017, and I was very lucky to be part of the MFD industry at that point of time. The way the global central banks will have to tighten liquidity means that we are possibly in a lower return and more volatile world. So the need for the MFD to be able to communicate to their investors this, and at the same time prepare the investors for a lower return volatile world, is going to be very necessary. And I believe that if this process of communication with their investors is seamless and interesting, it will put them at a very good advantage over all the digital apps, which may find it very difficult to communicate to their investors because they don't have that human touch. So I believe that it is important to have that human touch to actually create that expectations right in the minds of the investors. And I believe that the next 10 years is challenge is going to be getting the expectations of investors right. And I believe that many of the investors will find that the human touch that the MFD gives them is going to give them that benefit which they don't get with the digital environment alone. This is how we have looked at it. And thank you for all the support given to ICICI Mutual Fund, and look forward to your continued support. Thank you all and wish you all a happy year ahead. Thank you.